So let's get to plotting it. And we're going to plot it with a package called ggplot2. Or all of the commands we've used in R so far are part of what we call the base R system. So when you install R, you get a lot of packages with it, and they're automatically loaded when you start up RStudio. There are quite a lot of other packages, so there's about 12,000 packages in total. And for that reason, we don't want to load all of them, okay, because it would just be time consuming. So other packages that you want to use, you have to actually install them and then load them in R. So ggplot2 is one of these packages, and this is a package that comes with a set of packages called tidyverse. And tidyverse is a set of packages I would recommend. It's a meta package, we say. It's a collection of packages where all the packages work in a similar way. So they have the same sort of grammar and structure for their commands, which makes them a little bit easier to remember and also to work with data between them. So I highly recommend the tidyverse packages. Okay, so the way you want to install it, let me just go here, is you go to your packages window and you click install, type tidyverse in there, and then install. And it'll take a little while. I'm not going to do it because I've got it installed already. But then you should have it available. So I'll just click cancel here. You have to install a package once on your system, but you have to load it every time you use RStudio. So we load packages with this library statement, library tidyverse in this case. So I'm going to go back to COVID here, and I'm going to load the tidyverse packages. So let's go library. So this is then going to make those packages available for me. So there'll be a little delay here. So you've got a red button here saying stop, which just means I'm doing something. And you'll get some warnings, but they're fine. You don't need to worry about them. And it's telling you here, these are all the packages that you now have access to by loading the tidyverse. So you could have done library ggplot2, library tibble, library tidyr, library readr, and so on. But library tidyverse will load all of those for you simultaneously. And we're going to use ggplot2, we're going to use tidyr, and we're going to use dplyr. So for the moment, we're just installing it so we can use, or we're just loading it so that we can use ggplot. So just a little note on naming, that ggplot2 is the name of the package, but the function, its main function that you always have to use when you're doing a ggplot is ggplot. So in my notes here, where I've got a function or a name with little brackets afterwards, that means I'm referring to a function. Okay. So ggplot2 is the name of the package, ggplot is the most important command. ggplot works with data frames, as do all the tidyverse packages. So what we want to do is create a data frame out of those two variables we just made. So I'm going to copy this piece of code here, and I'm going to go to RStudio, and I'm going to make a data frame. There. Let's copy that in. And I'm going to run that. So now I've got a data frame called COVID. So what I think I'll do actually at this point is get rid of the age and the freak variables here, because I don't really need those anymore. So to do that, I use a function called rm, remove. So I'm going to do remove age, and then I'm going to remove freak. So that's gone, I've only got the data there now. And then I can get rid of that piece of code. Doesn't matter too much if you don't remove them, but it can make it easier to understand how to access things in the data frame. So this data frame exists, it's called COVID. But if I try and type age, which is one of the columns in that data frame, when I try and run that, so that output the contents of it, I get an error here saying there's no such thing as age. Okay, because that thing called age doesn't exist on its own. Okay, it only exists inside COVID. And the way you refer to a variable inside a data frame is to use dollar notation. So if you do COVID $, and you should get a little pop-up window which allows you to actually choose the variable, so it saves you typing. And that is how we refer to a variable which is inside a data frame. So this variable is COVID $age. And there's a little reminder of that if you do an str on COVID. It tells you at the bottom of the screen here that COVID is a data frame. It has several observations of 2 variables, and those variables are $age and $freak. I'm just going to click Control S to save my script here. So we've done an str on COVID already. And so COVID's just the name. I could have called it anything I like. And if you want to see a data frame like a spreadsheet-like view of COVID, you can click on your COVID word in the global environment here. I click on that, it'll open this spreadsheet-like view, which is kind of reassuring for most of us. So in order to create a simple bar plot, we use the ggplot function, and then we have to tell it what's the data frame that we want to plot, and we also have to give it something called aesthetics. So start by just getting the graph. So I'm going to copy this piece of code because I'm lazy. Space here. And I'll go through a little bit how to make this, how this sort of fits together. So that's the whole command. You'll notice it's got a plus in it as well. So if I run that, I or you should get a window up with that data plotted. So this is a default view. We're going to make this a little bit nicer in a minute. So the way ggplot works is that you have this ggplot command, and ggplot on its own is enough to make a graph. So if I was just to go ggplot, it will make a plot for me, but it'll have nothing on it. So you can see I've opened a plot here. It's got this light grey background, so you can see there's a plot that's opened, but there's nothing on it. So we might tell it what data set we want to plot. So if I say I want to plot this COVID data frame and run it again, it's actually done a fresh plot, but you can't really see anything still. So it knows what data set you want to plot, but doesn't know what to put where. And that's what this AES does. So this stands for aesthetic. It tells you where these variables are going to be in your plot. So we have a comma, and then the next argument, which is AES, and you open some brackets, and then you say what goes on the x-axis, what goes on the y-axis. We also might say what variable is shown by different colours, or what variable is shown by different panels, or what variable is shown by different shapes. In our case, we've only got 2 variables, and so we've only really got an x and a y. So I'm going to say x here is equal to age, and then the y is equal to freak. So if I run that, now I've got a graph. Now it knows what to put where, but it still doesn't know what kind of plot you want. And that's what this geom is. This is what we would call the first layer of a ggplot. And then you add layers to that plot with a plus. So I do plus, and then it's conventional to put it on a new line, and you get this automatic indentation that shows you that you're still part of the same command. You see I've got it's giving me a cross here to tell me I've got a plus with nothing after it. And then geoms, of which there are lots of different types, tell ggplot what kind of shape to do for your data. So there we have our geom col. But I can just as easily put point. So now I've got points there instead of columns. I could have both even if I want. So I can do another plus and do geom_col. So what's happened to that is that the columns have gone on after the dots. Let me make my points a little bit bigger, just so you can see it. So 6. It's quite big, yeah. So now I've got some big points on there. And because the column, geom column, has gone on second, it's overlaid the points. If I was to switch these round, that plus there, you'll see the points are now on top of the bars. So it gives you a little bit of an idea about this concept of layering, if you like, layering things on. Let me just show you something that you might come up. So let's say if I left a plus on there, so my command is sort of expecting something else, and then I run this, it appears like nothing has happened. Okay, so the command down at the bottom of the console, this plus, because we haven't got the prompt back here, there's no prompt there, it's a plus still, that's indicating that R is still expecting some input. So if you've done some code and you've got this plus here, it's because it's still expecting input. So no matter what you do, it's still expecting input. So the only thing to do is to add a bit more code. So I'm just going to add a little bit of code there and run it. And then I get an error because what is actually run is all of this as one code, and it doesn't quite make sense. So none of that's worked. So when you make those kind of mistakes, you usually have to find some way to run the code so you can go back and correct it.